All right. Going to call to order the meeting of the Newcastle Environmental Review Board for Monday, November 21st, 2022. I'm Jonathan Rosenblum, Chairman, and with us are David Horowitz and Ivan Walter, members of the board, as well as Dennis Corelli, the town's environmental coordinator. First order of business on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the meeting of September 19th, which I think we have to put over to the next meeting because we don't have a quorum to approve them since Ivan was absent, and otherwise it's just David and I. So Dennis, if you'll make a note, we have to approve these at the next meeting. Yep. First on the agenda, substantively, is the returning application for 34 Morton Place in Chappaqua. And I guess we have Alan. Alan is here to bring us up to speed as to what's happened since the last time we discussed this.
Okay, would you like me to share?
I'll make you a little more.
Can if you like.
Okay, that's what
Can you see that on the screen? Hopefully.
Yes.
Excellent. So since we were last here, this project, let me just sort of back up a moment. This project involves the proposed second floor addition and over a screen porch in the rear of the house and a wood deck to replace an existing brick patio. So that's what the project involves. And as you may recall, there's a water course which flows from south to north on the western edge of this property. That's Morton Place on the right. The Chappaqua Library is actually to the north. The church is kind of like to the east, and there are residential properties to the south. So when we were last here, it was pointed out by Dennis Corelli that there was a modification to the site plan that was done that obviously wasn't reflected in the most recent survey that we had, and that was the addition of when this driveway was repaved, the addition of an area kind of like in here, this sort of outline was added to the driveway, the paved area. And that was not, I'll say, considering that the water course is here and the wetland buffer runs through here, that was obviously work that was done within the wetland buffer. So what we did per the board's recommendation is to augment the mitigation area that's being proposed. This mitigation area is essentially where the drainage from the property, except for the in very close proximity to the water course, but everything else on this entire property drains out through the driveway area and into the water course. And so this area is a lawn area presently. And so the proposal here is to, what we're showing is an increased area to account for the addition, if you will, to the paved area of the driveway. Previously, that mitigation area was, or the impact within the wetland buffer was 342 square feet. But with the addition of the paved area here, it is 750 square feet. And what we're depicting here is an area of 810 square feet of mitigation. This is essentially the area where the existing lawn would be removed and replaced with native trees, that's and shrubs and some herbaceous species, kind of like below the existing trees. I guess that's a Norway maple here, but I know the owner is anxious to kind of keep it, so we kind of left it in here. So that's what the plan is, to account for the additional paved area, and that's what we are presenting. So I believe with that, we do accomplish more than a 1-to-1 ratio of mitigation over the impacts to the wetland buffer. They're all native species which are identified in the mitigation plant list. And with that, I'm hoping that we could potentially move this project forward. Any questions regarding what was being proposed or what's being planned on this property?
We discussed this, I think, pretty thoroughly at the last meeting. Ivan, you weren't here.
No, but I read the minutes
okay.
to see what.
Do you have any, is there any, in the way of questions, comments that
No.
jumps out at you?
No.
Okay.
You asked all the questions last time that I would have been interested in, drainage and everything else, so.
Dennis, what's your take on the changes and what Alan's proposed at this point?
Sure. I understand, and so I'll additionally comment, I understand why you'd want to, if the applicant wants to keep the Norway maple, that's fine. I'm not, and this is also, because growing on the stream bank, I think there was one privet and one burning bush, but you know, they're kind of established. So I understand if, you know, you don't want to remove those either. And if you did, I probably still would recommend that you keep the root ball. So if any of those, you know, the tree included needs to be trimmed to accommodate the mitigation plantings, I have no issue. I don't necessarily need to require removal of those in order to implement this. So I'm okay with the complementing, you know, in consideration of the, you know, owner's preferences. The only comment I had from looking at the minutes, because it was mentioned, is with respect to the stormwater, there was something about that there was an existing dry well on the site, and was that gonna also accommodate or get the direction of the flow from these additional structures? Or I thought you mentioned you might explore that. That was the only thing that from reviewing the minutes, that I didn't know how that was going to be closed.
I must admit, I'm not really sure of that dry well. I don't recall that being discussed. Maybe I missed something here. But this area of the property is just basically where the mitigation is being proposed, essentially just a lawn area. And you know, it's quite a distance from the freestanding frame garage that's here. So
Right.
if this dry well is somewhere in the yard, perhaps for some of the roof drainage, it's not going to be touched at all here. And I don't think the dry well will be in such proximity to the house itself. So, and I know the survey didn't identify that, so I'm not quite sure how to address that.
So I thought there were two questions. One was, with the new addition, where will those leaders go? And then, was there anything to be done with the driveway?
Well,
I think that's where the catch basin was, or something associated with that.
right, there is no catch basin on the driveway at all. And I really, because it's so flat here, there's not really an opportunity to direct runoff into it. So what is here instead is just the runoff basically flows in this direction. So the only direction it can actually travel is over this mitigation planting area. You know, the grades here are like 318, and here it's like 318 as well. So if there's a catch basin, you know, there usually is it's a buried storm pipe, if you will, you know, a foot and a half below grade. So there really isn't an opportunity to do that. As for the runoff from the, you know, the new addition and what's there presently, it basically just drains onto the ground surface. That's what it does, and it will continue to do that in the future. You know, it's, you know, there certainly is opportunity for mitigation as runoff would, let's say, exit from the second, you know, the proposed addition. It's, you know, it's nearly, you know, 60 feet or so across lawn in a planted area. So there is an opportunity here for some type of renovation, infiltration into the ground surface And any runoff that comes off of that too would be directed this way, because that's the way the runoff goes into this planted area. So that's how I see, the impacts of runoff from the new impervious surfaces being treated, if you will, because it doesn't go directly to the stream, because there is a kind of like a ridge or a high point, you sort of see contouring that's here, and the runoff is directed this way. So that's how it would be handled. I know we talked about maybe doing some type of rain garden or something like this, but I think this planted area by itself, by removal of the lawn and putting in a mulch bed through, within the perimeter of it, and in it, would help to force infiltration of the runoff into the ground where, there is some, renovation of, any water quality impacts.
So just to be clear, Alan, you're saying that there is no dry well at this point that's catching runoff from the existing leaders? Because I thought that's what was discussed last time. And the question.
Okay. I must admit, I don't recall that part of the discussion, as I said. And if there is a dry well there, maybe there's one in the front yard here, or maybe there's one in the back, but it's not really going to be touched by this, because I'm sure it's quite a distance away from the house. It wouldn't be in such proximity to it. And we had no, the survey had no indication of it. I'm not quite sure. I think it may just go into the ground, and perhaps, my recollection, it just goes onto the ground surface.
So in other words, the leaders just spill out onto the grass?
That's what I recall, yes. I know these do here for sure.
Mhm.
And as I say, there's the opportunity for renovation here. Owing to the fact that the stream is like 318, 317, and this is 319, if there's a dry well there, I'm sure it's pretty much non-functioning, because I have to think the groundwater table is pretty close to the elevation of the stream, which is not exactly atypical for that to occur.
Mhm.
It's probably like 318 or so. So if the water table is 2 feet below grade or something like this, there's not a lot of opportunity to construct a dry well and have any sort of separation between that and groundwater. I really don't think you find that the groundwater table is significantly below the elevation of the stream. That would be an unusual situation.
Mhm.
So someone might have installed the dry well, but I would question how well it functioned.
Okay. Dennis, you okay with that? With the
I mean, do they,
plantings?
just, my only question is, do they, I guess not, do they experience any issues now with the existing residents with that as a system, just in terms of moving water away from the structure?
They certainly never related anything to me. That's any issues at all.
Okay, no, because going back to like what you said earlier with regards to kind of where all the drainage, at least sort of has an opportunity to move towards, so that so we're not creating a situation where something that didn't happen before maybe happens now. You know what I mean? With these additional, structures and/or additions. So if it's still going to move in that direction, and that's where we're focusing our efforts, because I agree that is a pretty established evergreen berm, for the remainder of the stream course with, some good size, I think there were hemlocks, if I remember. Okay.
Right, and the only new area of roof that's gonna cause additional runoff is, it's already a structure, right? So there's already a roof there. It's not like you're adding a roof to an area that now is open,
This is,
right?
that's a wood deck here that goes over a patio.
Right,
So the wood deck itself would sort of percolate around, water.
it'll go right through.
Right, it'll go right.
Right. Yep.
And this is also over already what is part of a walkway, is part of the an existing walkway, brick walkway,
Yep.
here to connect to the existing patio. So
Right.
there's not that much new impervious surface that's being added.
Okay. Go ahead.
I can unshare if you would.
Okay. So then if nobody has any additional questions, comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve the application and let Dennis issue the permit.
I will so move.
So move. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Motion is adopted. Dennis, go ahead.
Okay. Don't go too far, Alan.
I'm not going very far. Thank you for letting me do this via Zoom now. I do appreciate it.
Next, 10 Overlook Drive. Alan, you're up again, I guess.
I am indeed. I'll share if you like to. I guess since it's being recorded, I'll say for the record, I'm Alan Pilch, ALP Engineering and Landscape Architect. Which I didn't say before, but I will now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the ERB. Let me just sort of introduce, I see that too, that Michael Sirignano is here as well online. He's at least listening. So let me just sort of present what this is. The property itself is almost 3 acres in size. It's located Route 117 Bedford Road here, Overlook Drive here. And it's a corner lot that's here. It's in the R1A district zone, by the way. The wetland itself is located here in the western portion of the property. There's kind of like this little upland area up here as well. And the 100-foot buffer from it runs through in this location here. So it takes up a good portion of the existing house. This is really just a connector almost between the main part of the house here and the garage that's here. And a portion of the driveway is also within it. The eastern portion of the property is outside of the buffer. All the runoff from the property too is conveyed essentially to this. There's a low point in here, kind of like a water course. It's kind of like a flow path that goes through and heads toward the south into other residential properties. That's kind of like where it is. So the proposal itself is to construct an addition. I don't know if it showed up well in the plan, but the addition is really in this location here. What's happening in here is that there's a second floor that's essentially over the existing that's going to be constructed. There's, the covered breezeway, so there'll be the breezeway will actually continue, but there'll be the second floor above here. But to provide access to it, the proposed addition is this stairway that's being proposed to reach the second floor above here. Because right now this is I wouldn't really call it. It's like a roofed area over 1 story, and the garage will remain here. And but the garage itself, they're putting out an addition over the top of the garage as well. And that's sort of where it stretches out a little bit here. That is, this is already the gravel driveway that's here. And so that's the addition that's being proposed here. I'd say it's 66 square feet addition, but most of it's over a gravel driveway. And the proposed addition, which is over a lawn area, is 103 square feet. So there aren't any proposed direct wetland impacts overall, the impact of new impervious surfaces over lawn areas is 103 square feet for the proposed stairway over here, and actually just 5 square feet for this is over a lawn landscaped area. The rest of that, as I noted, is over the gravel driveway. And you know, in sort of looking at the overall, I mean, almost no matter what you do in this building, because the wetland buffer itself slices through the house, it's pretty hard to avoid having some type of impact within the wetland buffer just because of the location of the house. And then to mitigate that impact, when I was out there, you know, looking at this property, you know, there's kind of like this open area here. There's some invasive plants in here, kind of like just beyond this upland area, within what is essentially just a wooded area here. And so what we're proposing to do is plant within this area, this kind of open area, some trees and shrubs. You know, as I said, the impact within the wetland buffer is 108 square feet. And this mitigation area here is the dashed line here, is about 420 square feet. So it's well over a 1-to-1 ratio of mitigation to wetland buffer impacts. And again, since the addition is over existing of the house, the new impervious surface is obviously very, very small. It's only about 108 square feet. And what's also depicted on this plan as well is just some of the erosion controls that we proposed. And so that's what's being proposed. So I'm certainly open to any comments and questions.
What is currently in the area that you're intending to do the mitigation planting?
I called it really, there's some invasives, there's some barberry, which is growing in here. And the rest of it's kind of like, I thought it was like invasive grasses or something in here. That's what it appeared to be to me.
What's the rest of it? The overall wetland area? Yeah, the
Generally
whole
wood.
green, it's wooded?
Yes. It is indeed. That's kind of like what this like line represents here. It's kind of the woodsy area here. I got that off of the aerial as well, having walked through this too. That's, you know, I kind of looked at the wetland flags and saw where it was open, and that's so that's where it's being proposed.
So is there actually a water course that flows through there somewhere, or?
Well, there is a catch basin on Overlook Drive here, and there's I think it's a 12-inch pipe which discharges into here. So there is kind of like I don't know if I call it, you know, I was walking through there and I didn't really see, you know, as I said, there was not like a water course flowing or anything like that. That's why I called it more of a flow path at the low point here, because it rises up towards Bedford Road. But this is all that's indicated on here. I'll just point out the wetlands were flagged by Mary Janet. You can see on August 24th, 2022. It was survey located by Link Land Surveyors.
So I guess my only question is, if this is already wooded, how does what you're proposing to plant in that one specific area, how does that enhance the wetland itself? Because, you know, typically we would, and look, nobody's questioning the fact that the impact here, you know, is pretty darn modest. So I don't want to make a federal case out of it, but usually when we would ask for mitigation, it's done either outside existing wetland into the buffer, but in some ways the planting is intended to enhance the operation of the wetland itself. So, I mean, does this, why this planting here, you know, in terms of that question?
Okay, I think the reason I looked at it too was I certainly know that in this area here, it's, I guess it's the unusual part, if you will, of the wooded wetland area on this property, where it's kind of like open and, I'll say more barren, if you will, than other areas. So that seemed to be an area where one could enhance it by providing some trees and understory which aren't there presently. That's kind of like how I was looking at it. But I understand if you have perhaps other things you might want to look at. I understand.
Well, for
Dennis?
instance, I mean, you mentioned invasives. I mean, are there other areas where, there are a significant amount of invasives that, you could help the situation by removing some of that and planting something, in place of those?
Yeah, there really weren't a lot of invasives that I saw. The usual things that I look for, of course, is, barberry, and there were occasional burning bush that I found, Euonymus alatus, but it really wasn't extensive, if you will. Just occasional ones that I was able to spot that were out there.
Dennis, have you been by the site yet?
Yep. So I did call Alan after I visited the site, and we had a conversation, and, I'm looking at this obviously out of the growing season, so, maybe I have a different perspective. I mean, I did see the barberry in that area, but to me, almost the exception, the variability of this spot within the context of the wooded area, I thought, kind of provided, something different for the system. And then, walking this little upland area, I admit when I first saw the plan, I'm like, well, is that potentially your mitigation spot? Just make that upland area wetlands. But again, I would say no, like there's a unique dynamic going on here. I don't know how else to describe it, that I'm like, I would probably leave that alone. And I said to Alan, I said, in consideration of, the impacts are minor, I thought there were two other areas closer to the edge of where sort of the clouded edge of woods ends. One was in the vicinity of flags 6 and 7, below that stone masonry retaining wall, and the other was, moving more towards the I guess the southern portion of the site, where it's, maintained lawn, but on that particular day, you could definitely see, where the water was a little ponded, and I'm sure it's saturated for much of the year. So to your point, which I guess that was a good introduction, that was kind of where my eye was gravitating towards as two candidate areas.
I understand. I mean, I too had looked at this area as well here. I didn't really look so much at this area here. But I had initially looked at this area here too as certainly a potential candidate. And this is kind of like shows the, the canopy, if you will, but this is really just the edge of the, I guess these wetland flags are, they're sitting at they're right at the edge of the treat area.
And there were some, if I recall, like there were pin flags and lawn.
Right.
Towards the end there, it definitely kicked out where Mary had, delineated, and I had no issue with the line.
So Dennis, are you saying that you did or didn't like this location for planting?
I didn't want to mess with that area.
You'd want to leave it as it is?
Yeah, it was pretty saturated. So I mean, you saw some pockets of standing water. So, didn't want to muck around in there, for lack of a better description. I thought, it just felt standing there and walking around, going from the upland to that area. I said, this kind of has a unique array in a very, small concentrated area that I, just felt like from a habitat utilization standpoint, I thought it was a fair amount for a smaller system and area. I didn't want to, sort of mess with that dynamic.
And you thought you saw a couple of opportunities near the edge of the forest where the ground was wet, where you thought there might be
Right, or like below the wall, I thought the leaves that were popping out, I thought it was all garlic mustard. Obviously, it's a fair amount of leaf litter, so over time, whatever, whether it be, that's where the leaves settle, that's where they're blown to, whatever, I guess other seed stock, I'm sure that, either A, on the property, or B, that landscapers bring with them, because nobody decontaminates equipment in between visits. That's what ends up happening. So I just thought it was a good opportunity spot. And again, it wasn't gonna necessarily have to cover hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of square feet because of the, minor, impacts of the project.
Right. Okay.
I was sort of thinking that, planting done sort of in the middle of a wooded area away from the house would, quickly be consumed by the wooded area or the deer or, whatever else. And that if they were gonna plant something, it might make more sense for it to be in a place where they could appreciate it and, maybe even protect it.
Right.
It's not a very thickly wooded area, I'll say that much. So, I mean, you can clearly
would
see
be-
Bedford.
They'd be able to see it.
Oh, yeah, you can clearly see Bedford Road. Yeah, it's not thickly wooded, that's for sure. But that being said, I understand where you're coming from.
But, and I want to reiterate that, yeah, the amount of new impervious surface is very minimal. And so,
Right.
Really anything that you would come up with would probably meet the mitigation formula.
As long as Dennis felt it was an appropriate location.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's why, to my mind, this is an application that at this point, would be susceptible to doing some kind of conditional approval, and making the effectiveness, contingent only on doing some kind of revised mitigation plan, in the areas, that we've talked about that Dennis can sign off on administratively. So we don't have to bring it back to a next meeting.
Okay, I will say I had initially, based on what Dennis had said, looked at potentially doing something roughly in that area. Between 8, 9, 10, 11, those flags, and maybe moving it slightly to the east, but essentially in this area. So it would replace this with something here, which is basically at the edge of the within the very edge of the canopy, but within the, partly within perhaps hydric lawn, but it would actually help the benefit to, provide some buffer where some of the runoff goes as well.
Okay. That's not something that Dennis has seen yet?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Based
Well,
on
why
our
don't you-
discussion, we discussed that last week when Dennis called me. I think I remember it's Thursday or Friday when he called me.
Okay.
So that's kind of like what we discussed, and I was looking at it, just trying to see what one could do or might do there.
All right, well, why don't you flesh that out a little more, do a revision, submit it to Dennis, and, you and he can work out the final details of it. And whatever he's comfortable with will be fine with us.
Okay, that's
All
fine.
right?
That's
Do we
great.
need to-
I appreciate that a lot.
All right, so yes, so subject to those comments and those limitations, I'll entertain a motion to approve the application conditionally based on the architect submitting a revised mitigation plan that would be subject to Dennis's review and concurrence. Okay, do I have a motion?
Motion to what you just said.
Second.
All in favor of the issuing a conditional approval at this point? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks,
We'll
Alan.
talk soon.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk next week.
Okay.
Great.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah,
Yes, you too. Thank you. And have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
You too.
For everyone, for you and your family.
You too. Valley St. Elmo Hills. Never heard that.
Is that? No, I don't think so. So the Clintons are right here,
Yeah, they're like just off there.
just up the street. Okay, 136 Roaring Brook Road.
Hello, Vladimir Levin, architect with Michael Picarillo Architecture. Here on behalf of the owner to present the project to the board.
Good evening.
So this, I'm sorry,
I just said good evening.
good evening. So the project is it's an existing house on a very severe lot. With very steep slopes. The house is pretty much on the edge of a ravine. 3/4 of the property, I would say, is probably inaccessible in back of the house. And the majority of the property is in the wetland buffer as well. The proposed project is a second-story addition on top of the existing house, and a front porch as well, and a proposed pool to the south of the property.
How long has the applicant lived in this house?
He just bought the house, so there is no one living there currently. We're planning some major renovations to the house, as you can see in the drawings that were submitted.
So it was very recently they purchased it.
They just purchased it recently, correct?
So I'm looking at the section drawing and I'm seeing, yeah, this A010.
Yep.
Is this all, does this all indicate area that's gonna be filled to support the structure? Because the way it's drawn, it looks almost as if it's cantilevered over the ravine. Is this dark line the existing grade?
Are you referring to the drawing number
Site-
1?
Site section number 1, correct?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no proposed fill. So the site section may be graphically deceptive, but no, there's no fill proposed. The house is existing, so we're just building a second floor on top of the existing house.
So what are those lines? The one diagonal and then the 3 horizontal lines? What
Yeah,
do those
that's
represent?
just, yeah, that's just, you know, this site section is from a 3D model. So those lines that you're seeing is the topography beyond the cut. Beyond
So
the
this,
section.
so-
so this cut,
so in
this
other
cut
words,
is through
further
the
back.
pool.
So further back from that area, the ground goes up
Mhm.
and supports the foundation of the house.
Essentially, yes.
Take a look at this picture. This one. Looks like it goes out a couple of feet and then comes down. Even that,
Yeah, walk the back of the house.
is that a stable embankment?
It's a couple steps and you're going down, yeah, too far out the back.
Was this one when they built the house, they just leveled off and pushed down to give them a place to
What they can get, right?
Do
live?
we know when this house was built?
I believe it was built in the 1960s.
With all the work that you're doing, is the existing foundation of this house able to support the 2 stories?
From what we're able to see initially, it is. Foundation wall is definitely thick enough, and there doesn't appear to be any kind of structural damage. But we will have a structural engineer as we move forward to give a further evaluation.
So just maybe so I understand, what you're looking to do fully in the buffer is to put a pool and rebuild the house. In the buffer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the entirety of the house is within the buffer. So yes, we're looking to add a second story on top of it. Incidentally, there is a second story above a section of the existing house. It's just, you know, it's dormered out in the back. So we're just expanding that second floor over the entire house. So we're really not expanding the footprint of the habitable space other than a small cantilevered addition in the back of the house. I would say the major addition, the new footprint, is the covered porch in the front of the house and the proposed pool.
So yeah, so let's leave the pool aside for a minute. Can you take us through in a little bit of detail exactly what and where? It seems to me that the site plan is probably the best drawing to look at for this, but
Sure.
where and how much the footprint is precisely being expanded?
So the dark outline here, this is the existing house. In the back, which is the west, the dark shaded area is a cantilevered addition without a foundation, obviously. And then there's right next to it is a cantilevered balcony.
So when
the
you say
front-
when you say cantilevered, what does that mean in terms of on the ground?
It
Anything?
means there's no foundation beneath it. So it just hovers above the land.
But so then technically, in terms of the footprint in the land, it doesn't increase it.
It doesn't touch the ground,
Right.
but yeah.
As long as there's no column.
So there are no columns that are going to be coming down.
They're not. You could, if you look at here, I'll show you in the. So you could see in the rear elevation, you could see right here, these 2 windows here in the balcony, you could see there is nothing below
we don't-
them.
You're not sharing.
Right, you're not sharing your screen. so
Oh, I'm
when you-
sorry. I'm sorry. God, this whole time I thought I was sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Okay.
There you are.
Yeah, so this is the rear elevation, and this area here you could see is a bump out. It's cantilevered. If you'd like, I could show you. I mean, this is maybe a little bit clearer. There is, so there's the cantilevered wall there, and here's the balcony. There's no foundation
So-
below it. It's-
So that's not really an increase in the footprint per se.
No, it's not
Um,
disturbing the soil.
It's not, no, it's not disturbing the soil. It's correct.
But in front, you say that it is. You've got a new covered porch.
Yeah, I don't know if this is helpful to the board to look at the 3D model. I could go back to the 2D elevations.
No, this
This is
is,
good.
this is helpful.
Okay, yeah, so this is an existing retaining wall here, which is a nice wall, and we're keeping it. And we're adding a porch. Part of it is covered with a roof, as you can see. Part of it is not, and it extends to that existing retaining wall. So this is really the increase in footprint is the porch, the roof, and the porch wraps around the house to a pair of exterior doors, which lead out to a patio. This patio is existing. We're just going to rebuild it and add a little bit more paving to it.
So if in the page that has, is this it right here? Is it, yeah, it is, because that's where the fireplace is. So it's this stone patio that you see in the top center picture, right?
Of the radius wall and the common wall.
Right, here's the radius wall.
Yes.
I see, so this, well, how does this relate to this?
You come around the corner and then you see
I
this.
see, okay. Oh, right, okay.
Right.
This is from the front.
This is,
This is the front of the house here with the,
Yeah,
with the
and this is basically shot standing on the wall, it looks like.
So that's gonna be where the patio is and then the pool beyond. And is that entire wall existing?
Yes,
All the
it
way
is.
through where the pool is?
Yes, it is.
So have you calculated exactly what the new impermeable coverage would be? Leaving out,
Yeah.
leaving aside the pool?
Without the, without the pool, the new impervious coverage is about 760 square feet.
Okay, and that's largely taken up by the new porch in the front.
Yes, the porch, and there's a couple of there's a walkway that goes from the porch, as you could see here, that goes from the porch to the driveway. And then there's a little walkway that goes toward the back of the house. But yes, the majority of it is the porch.
Okay.
And the porch really seems to be just a captive area between
Mhm.
the wall and the building. The stairs in the back, is that a new structure?
Well, currently there are just pavers in the dirt. So we're looking to sort of retain a way to get down to that lower level where we have a new door. So we're looking to do some sort of pavers down the existing slope. I have some pictures to show you what it currently looks like. So that's that corner of the house, and you could see there's some pavers that kind of lead you down to that lower elevation. So that's what we're looking to do there.
Is that included in your impervious calculation?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so given that all of this is taking place in the buffer, and you know, if we were to issue the permit for it, the impacts such as they are would have to be mitigated. Have you given some thought to possible mitigation? Or were you just coming for some kind of conceptual review and approval at this point, or?
Yes, I'm here today to get some guidance regarding the mitigation. But mostly before we retain the services of the site engineer to do the mitigation plans, we wanted to understand if the pool was something that would be approved in its current location, and if not, possibly explore other locations for that pool. With or without the pool, the mitigation would be different, I presume.
Right. Right. Well, I think you already had a conversation or two with Dennis about this board's policy with respect to pools in the wetland buffer. And now taking a look at the site and seeing that almost the entire property is within the buffer, I'm not sure, where there could be any kind of feasible area on this property to put a pool, to tell you the truth.
So, this site plan here, the blue area is what is the wetland buffer essentially. So
Right.
there's a small sliver in the front, and the only other place outside of the buffer would be back here in the rear yard. The only issue with that obviously is access to that area,
Right.
which, unless you're going to take a hike through the woods, the only other way I could see getting there is with a bridge.
I agree.
Perhaps a zip line.
Yeah.
Or a zip line, exactly, yes. Yeah. So, that would be the only other place, and then the question becomes whether a bridge, however crazy that may sound, would be something that would be acceptable to the board if we were to propose a pool back here in the rear yard.
Well, obviously, it would depend on what kind of bridge and where it was. Certainly a bridge is preferable to a pool in the buffer. I don't know whether that's something that your client, given the topography of this site, would be interested in having back there. I don't know.
You're gonna fit the zoning board, right? You're gonna run into.
Yeah, you might have setback problems with the property line too. But
Do they allow, also does zoning allow
Well-
in the side yard that comes in
No,
front of the property?
no, zoning does not allow that, so
Right.
it would require a variance.
In either case, yeah. I don't know that
Can
this
I ask-
property was destined for a pool.
Well, the owner, he's making a significant improvement to the property in terms of the house that's there. The original house hasn't been touched since it was built, as you can see from the elevations, it's a significant improvement, and he wants to enjoy his property, you know, as much as he can. And, you know, it's a very difficult site to work with. There's really, 3/4 of it is really inaccessible because of the steep slopes at the back. So, you know, we're trying to, you know, he really, you know, the pool is an amenity that's, you know, that he really would like to have.
But
We're
that's
just trying to
exactly,
explore where we can put it.
that's exactly the point, though. It's an amenity.
Uh,
And, you know, you talk to Dennis, you go back and take a look at the history of applications and requests that have been made to this board for pools in the wetland buffer, and the situations where anything like that has been entertained are few and far between. So it's really not consistent with the spirit of the wetland ordinance, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Does the difficulty of the site play any role in your decision here, given that, you know, there's really the what I would call the sort of the building envelope is very limited in this case, given the steep slope in the back?
Well, it's not really, to tell you the truth, so much the steep slope. The main issue that causes the situation you have here is that this is a house that, if it were proposed now, would never be allowed to be built, because a house like this would, it's all in the buffer.
Septic would be approved.
Where is this?
It's in the front.
So the, you know, the fact that the house is existing and it's in the buffer does create some leeway. And that's why when homeowners are looking to expand existing houses so that they can provide additional living space, additional bedrooms for young growing families, we bend over backwards to try and support that and find as much flexibility as we can. But it's a whole different story when you're talking about just adding a swimming pool, to tell you the truth.
And a house that
Right.
was just recently purchased as opposed to something that has been there forever,
Exactly.
pre-ordinance.
Right. Right.
Okay, so the pool's a no-go.
Pool's a no-go.
Okay. Okay, so what about the rest of the proposal, the
Well,
covered porch?
The impacts on the wetlands itself for the rest of the proposal are relatively modest, because most of the work is being done on top of or, you know, within the existing structure. So you're not,
And also that,
appreciably-
and that the area that you're disturbing is not really a functioning piece of the wetland.
Exactly.
So-
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's, you know, some of it is already impervious. So those impacts are relatively modest, and I would think that the site would have more than enough areas, you know, that you could come up, you know, in conjunction with a landscape architect or wetlands scientist or whoever you choose to engage, come up with some meaningful mitigation, you know, that you could propose to Dennis, propose to us for the, you know, next meeting or meeting after that, and would probably be acceptable, and, you know, we could go ahead and approve the rest of the application without the pool.
Well, besides mitigation.
Okay.
So the drainage. Explain how that drainage is gonna happen, being that the driveway is right at the edge. So you got the driveway, then you'll have the new impervious areas. And being that all of this is in the buffer area, how are you handling the roof drainage as well as the new impervious areas? That should be also part of your discussion with Dennis.
Will we be required to retain the stormwater runoff from the new impervious areas in dry wells?
That's an alternative. There's other, you know, because
I don't know
you're
where gonna
underneath,
Put a dry well.
right, you're under, so this is always the
Standing
discussion
manholes.
for clarity. You're under, and I'm not the town engineer, but you're under 1,000 square feet, which is usually the magic number where you have to start worrying about, you know, engineering in accordance with, you know, DEC, speedy, stormwater, all that. But still, this board, you know, from a water, you know, quality perspective, just, you know, so that it's not just a straight run from, you know, impervious surface through a conduit and, you know, down and out. You know, some sort of, you know, retention or, you know, some sort of amelioration of, you know, potential nutrient, you know, load directly into the stream that would otherwise make it from like a point source or from a surface runoff source.
Got it, understood. Okay, so thank you for that. So our next step will be to prepare a mitigation plan, remove the pool, and make a submission for the next meeting.
Okay, the only other comment I'll have is probably, and this will be at the time of construction, I may just ask for, I don't know, maybe a row of hay bales behind the silt fence, maybe a second silt fence, because this is it's an interesting steep shot, you know, so I probably would want just another layer of reinforcement, you know, in terms of the erosion controls before reaching the brook.
Okay, noted. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just as David suggested, just to consider what you intend, where you intend the runoff to go and how it's gonna be handled. Just because those questions likely will arise in the review of the project. So, you know, if you wanna kind of keep things moving, to have already thought that through a little bit.
Got it. Yeah, like I said earlier, we're going to retain the services of the site engineer to handle the mitigation plans and the stormwater management and everything else related to the site.
Sounds good.
Okay,
All right.
Okay,
All right,
thank you very much for
Excellent.
your time.
thank
All
you.
right.
Have a
Good.
night.
Have a good night.
You too, thank you.
Okey-doke. Okay.
This is even, I mean, to be frank, when I was leaving the site that day, this isn't exactly the greatest line of sight either, with Roaring Brook Road coming downhill and on this curve. I was just like, am I gonna make it? Am I gonna make it? So, it's a tough spot
Where
all
is it?
around.
Are
Where
we
is
still
it?
on, still being recorded?
Why don't we,
Yes.
is that it? Anything else, Dennis?
I owe you guys, which I developed, just the meeting schedule for 2023, which I forgot to put in your packets, but I'll email that to you guys tomorrow. If there's
Okay,
any issue.
Good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
all right, good. Then having no other further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.